today we're going to recap our year of guests for 2022 from the iSpark Change podcast. What is up, Impact Heroes? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rick Ornelas. Thank you for spending some time with us today because we know time's a valuable resource and we're going to make it worth your while. I appreciate each and every one of you, not just for listening, but for who you are. I know you're sparking change to make the world a better place every day, and I am humbled and grateful for your efforts. It takes all of us doing our part to spread positive change, and that's what this show is all about. Motivating you with stories of struggle, courage, and hope to empower you to make a difference in your life and the lives of others.
Are you interested in having Rick speak at your event or business? Here is what others have to say.
Did not know his story, and it was so inspirational, and his presence on stage, his authenticity was just incredible.
I absolutely loved his performance. It made me feel some type of way.
If you're looking for a speaker for your next event, hire Rick. I promise you this, you will not be disappointed.
Visit rickornelas.com to book him today.
Welcome back, Impact Heroes. I'm excited to be here for a super special episode today where I'm going to share some positivity, some inspiration, and I know you are going to dig this episode. We had an incredible year of amazing guests, and I am so incredibly grateful for each and every one of them. So today, we're going to recap our year of guests for 2022 from the iSpark Change podcast. So I'm going to start out by saying that 2022 was our first year on the podcast. We launched on March 9th of this year with our first episode, which was my story. And, I felt it was important to share who I am, right? Like, a little bit about my background and how I got here on my journey. And then what you could expect, right? We shared another episode. Next episode shared what we could expect. I had the episodes with my solo episodes throughout the year, and you can go back and check those out. We had those every other week. We had a solo episode. Some were social impact spotlights, which I will briefly mention here. But some were episodes where I had a theme and talked about something important, something that might have been timely or something that was going on during the year. But I feel it's important to highlight our guests because they were so gracious in coming on the show, and they all had such incredible things to contribute. So what I'm going to do is I'll share just a brief little blurb about each one because there were a lot. And then I'm going to share a quote, one of my favorite quotes that each of them said from the show. So you can go back, if you follow us on social media, you may have seen some of these quotes before, but you can go back and check those out, and you can listen to those episodes and hear the context of each one of these quotes. And maybe I'll give you a little context, here and there. But so let's dive right in. Now, our first guest was Allison Little. Allison Little is a speaker, a best-selling author, a keynote speaker, and a leadership coach. And she was our first guest, and that was very special for myself and for Allison. The reason why is because if you go to our website, isparkchange.com, you'll notice that Allison Little was our original social impact hero. And so to have her on the podcast as a social impact hero just made sense. And we were very thrilled to have her. But the quote that she said that stood out for me was, "I've had to overcome a lot of things, but what it's done in my life is it's built resilience." And that really spoke to me because, we all have things that happen in our life, the struggles, the challenges, but for them to build that resilience, that is what is so important, because that's what's going to continue through, right? We all have challenges, but it's what you learn from them and how you become stronger. Our next guest was Melissa Bright. Now, Melissa has a podcast, The Bright Side of Life, which is a really cool podcast. Check that out. And she had been someone that I had been on her podcast and really enjoyed our conversation, knew she would be an awesome guest. So we had her on the show. And I know she talks a lot about mental health, and she's very open about, some of the challenges and the things that she's gone through in her life. And the quote that stood out to me that she said is, "There can be joy and happiness after pain and grief." And I know she's had to deal with some pain and grief in her time. And I know a lot of you have, and, as have I. And, just know that you can get to that good place, that there can be that joy and happiness. And that's why that stood out for me. Our next guest was Danny Bader. And Danny Bader is someone who has been one of my mentors for many years after I met him when I was working in the corporate world, and he came in and did a presentation. And Danny he's a speaker. Does corporate trainings and workshops, and he really is impactful in his work, and is a 4-time author. So I urge you to go check out his books. But his story is pretty cool in that he essentially died and came back to life. And so in that episode, the quote that stood out is, "Every day when you wake up, you are back to life." And that just speaks to, the power of our being intentional with your time and each and every day on how, it's a gift. Every day is a gift. And so you want to treasure it as such. Episode 9, She Will See Your Greatness, was Brenda Warren. And Brenda is also a coach. She does a lot of work with veterans and supports them in their work. And I just love Brenda. She just has such a great heart and a great soul. And my favorite quote from Brenda was, "You write the story you want to live, so make it an epic adventure." Right? If you're going to write the story, you might as well make it an epic adventure. And I just love that so much because why not, right? We only get one life. And I saw something today. It said, this is not a practice. Life is not a practice. You get one shot. So might as well make it an epic adventure, like Brenda says. So in episode 11, we had Alicia Anderson, and that episode was called A World of Belonging. And Alicia is someone that is big in diversity and inclusion and awareness for those that are disabled and adaptability, and I had asked her about the word disability, and what she said is that what she likes to say is widening the doors for all of us to have a life that we choose. And it's just a metaphor that obviously in her case with her wheelchair, right, you want to widen those doors and not have any limitations for her. But it's just showing that all of us can have a phenomenal life, and we want to give everyone wide open doors, right, to do that. In episode 13, we had Dr. Joe Martin, and that episode we titled Building His Kingdom. And Joe is a really interesting guy, really, really cool guy. He's someone that he's got a great podcast as well, Real Men Connect. So definitely check that out. But the quote that stood out to me was, "I use my God-given talents to help others achieve God-given goals, to love him with all their hearts, soul, and mind, and to love others as they do themselves." And what stood out to me about that quote is that we all have God-given talents. All of us, anyone that's listening to this, anyone on this planet, God has given you talents and he has given you gifts. And so why not put those to use to accomplish some God-given goals? Because if something comes across your heart, if something comes across your mind and you see that as a goal, then you can know that that is a gift from God. And, in doing so, you're going to glorify him, and then you can return that love, and you can return that love to others. So really, really special quote. That was a fantastic conversation that we had. So in our next episode, we had the founders of Next Gen HQ, Justin Lafazan and Dylan Gambardella. And those are two super cool young guys, and they've created a wonderful organization, and they are just doing incredible things. And that show was entitled Unifying Gen Z and Finding Solutions. And the quote that they shared, I'm going to share one quote from each of them, actually, because that was our first show with two guests at the same time. And from Dylan, it was, just get started. You will never have it figured out. So look, a lot of what holds people back from doing something is getting started, right? They want the conditions to be perfect. They want them to be ideal. Guess what? They're never going to be ideal. They're never going to be perfect. So you just have to get started, right? And you'll figure it out along the way. And then the one from Justin was, you are capable of pursuing and achieving success if you can learn to think like an entrepreneur. And one thing that I think is so cool about Justin's quote is that Gen Z, which they're both a part of, they are far more entrepreneurial than my generation, Gen X or millennials or previous generations. And I think part of that is accessibility to, all the technology and everything that's going on in the world. But I think also it's just because they're want to learn. These are guys that are open and they have that mindset of an entrepreneur. So I think that's super cool. A great quote. In episode 17, we had Brian Bogert, right? And Brian, he's a coach, he's a speaker. He has an incredible story, himself. And the quote that stood out for me is that my purpose in life is to allow my truth to give others permission to live theirs. And so, in that it shows that that in order to help others, you have to put your best foot forward. You have to live your purpose and that allows others to feel comfortable, right? So they don't feel limited. They don't feel limited like, oh, they're not going to be able to do something because you're holding yourselves back. In our next episode that was actually our only remote episode we did on site. We were actually at the Next Gen HQ event in New York City, and we interviewed Sophie Barron, who is the creator of the Conversationalist and POVs. Really cool. Another Gen Z, another mover and shaker from Gen Z. But the quote that stood out from that episode was when she said, "We're not the leaders of tomorrow, we're the leaders of today." Because I think I had said something about, Gen Z being the leaders of tomorrow. And she's like, no, we're actually leaders today, that, what we're doing now, that it matters and that it plays a role. And so I thought that was really cool, was really interesting. In episode 19, we had Reinvent Your Mindset, Upgrade Your Identity. And that was the one and only Craig Siegel. And Craig Siegel is someone that has become a good friend of mine, especially after, we connected on the podcast and got to meet in person. And he's just a really cool guy. He has his CLS experience and his podcast and his coaching and membership. Really great guy, growing very fast. And the quote that stood out from him was, "You don't manifest what you want, you manifest what you are." And that really speaks to just, it goes back to kind of what others had said in some of the previous quotes, is that you have to be the best version of yourself if you want to grow, if you want to become a better version, right? If you want to become the version 2.0 or 3.0 or 10.0, right? Then you gotta keep growing. and that's really special. In episode 21, Living Life in the Words of God, we had Andrew F. Carter. Andrew is a pastor, and he does a ton of, he has a church in Los Angeles, but he does a ton of work on TikTok and on social media, on Instagram, and he's blown up on social media, but he's now reaching millions of people daily with his work. And so it's just phenomenal. He's also one of our social impact heroes. You can go check out on our website. That video is entitled Words of Gold. And you can watch the video and you'll learn why we titled it Words of Gold. But again, you could see this kind of theme. His quote that stood out is, each of us were born with a plan and a purpose that God has created us for. And it speaks to what I was saying earlier, is that, we've been given gifts, we've been given talents. God has a purpose for us. He wants to use us to help others and to serve others and love and make the world a better place. And we were born with that. And, it's our job to fulfill that purpose, right, and put it to use. So in episode 23, we had Rob Shear from Comfort Cases, and that episode was entitled One Backpack at a Time with Unconditional Love. And he has an incredible story of his time in foster care when he was young and getting out of that, and then how along with his partner, they decided to foster some children, and that blossomed into creating Comfort Cases, where they provide backpacks of toiletries and comfortable items for new foster kids. And they've done hundreds of thousands of these backpacks, and they continue to grow. And just a beautiful organization, great story. And what stood out from him was that if each and every one of us loves unconditionally, that is how our world is going to be better. And, it just speaks to say that, that's the greatest gift that we can give, another individual is to love, and also to love unconditionally. So when you do that, trust me, you make the world a better place every time you do that. Episode 25, we had Alex Simon, my brother Alex Simon, who is a very cool guy, great heart, great soul. That episode was entitled Motivational Music for Your Heart. And in that quote was, quit making excuses and go live the life that you know you can live. And he's had his own challenges, his own struggles, and setbacks in life. But he finally decided to stop making excuses and to just go, start living that life, and stop the excuses. And that was his tip for everyone else. In episode 27, it was another episode with two guests. That's episode Shining Diamond Duo, and that's where we had Mark Williams and Kathy Armias. And those two have a special place in my heart, because they helped me when I was on their show. They helped me to come up with to coin the term spark moment. Originally, if you go back to the early episodes of this podcast, we were just talking about those being a ripple effect, right? Doing something in action that causes a ripple effect. But that's where we realized that we needed a name for that, and they helped me come up with spark moment. But I'm going to share one from each of them. And one is first from Mark, which says, I believe that we were all put on this planet to save the earliest version of ourselves. Now, I almost misread that, but it's a really, really cool quote if you think about it, to save the earliest version of ourselves. So some of us, when we're younger, and myself included, we may not necessarily have been on the right path. We may have been doing some things that we shouldn't have done when we were younger. But we can change. We have the power to change every day. We have the power to change who we are and become that better version. And that's why he says, save the earliest version of ourselves. And the quote from Kathy is, "My purpose is to help people to search, to find, and to share their brilliance." And Kathy does that. I mean, she helps people to get TEDx on TEDx stages and to share that. And it's just, she helps people share their brilliance. And that's why I love that quote. In episode 29, Vulnerability is Her Superpower, we had the one and only Amy Porterfield. Now, a lot of you may know Amy. She has one of the most successful and popular podcasts out there, period. And so you'll definitely want to check that out. But she is the most down-to-earth and just gracious, one of the most down-to-earth and gracious human beings you are ever going to meet. And just a pleasure to speak to. And we had a blast on that show. I thoroughly enjoyed it. She thoroughly enjoyed it. And, you know, I had asked her, is that that if you know, she helps a lot of people, right? She trains a lot of people. She helps a lot of people, her courses, her podcasts. I mean, it helps millions, right? Millions and millions of people. And, you know, I had asked her about, you know, how can people get clarity on, you know, on growing and becoming a better version of themselves? And she says, it comes down to getting really clear about what you want and what's most important to you. And, you know, that spoke to me because it wasn't until I really figured out my why, that speaks to the why, right? It wasn't until I figured out my why that, and what was important to me, that I didn't start having, you know, real good success and being really fulfilled in life. On episode 31 and 32, our only two-part show of the year, we had Jim Woodford. These are episodes you are going to want to go back and listen to or watch, because Jim Woodford is a man who died for 11 hours and, you know, was clinically dead and came back to life. And he has an incredible story of the time that he spent in heaven. And that's why these episodes are called, you know, A Message from Heaven, part 1 and part 2. But he had a lot of quotes. I mean, a lot of quotes. He went very deep because, you know, he has great insight having been to heaven. But one that really stood out was when a very short quote when he said, "What God sees in mankind is himself." And go listen to this episode, because this is Jim's quote from the episode, but he was sharing what someone else had shared with him when he was in heaven. So you'll want to go back and listen and see who was sharing that quote with him. You know, what God sees in mankind is himself. Very powerful thought to think of, and you know, very inspirational. On episode 33, which was called Revolutionary Medicine, we had our first physician. We had Dr. Dung Trin, and he does incredible missionary work all over the world. He's involved in so many different organizations, and he talked about moving medicine into the metaverse and everything and what that's going to look like. And it was super cool. I mean, just stuff that was really, really interesting, fascinating. But the quote that stood out from him was, when your mindset changes the framework of how you look at the world, and how you look at the world changes, that's when you realize you're making an impact every day. And I think that's a result of him. I think that is the result of him seeing so much in his life, right? I mean, he was a refugee from Vietnam, and the things that he had to deal with to, you know, get to this country, and all the work that he does now to improve things for others. I think that's very, very special. So go back and check that out. On episode 35, we had Michael Unbroken, and we entitled that A Hero for the Books. And, you know, Michael's a really cool guy. He's a podcaster and a coach. He's got different courses, and he's impacting a lot of lives. and the he was so real. He told it like it is, said it like it is, and that's what I loved about Michael. And he had some really cool quotes. You'll want to go back and check out our social media for those quotes, but I'm just going to share one, and because it talks about keeping it real. And it says, the reason that your life sucks right now is because you're not investing in the right things. And, as a fellow coach, someone that works with people and, has to call them out sometimes, that really resonated with me. But, it's one of those look in the mirror kind of things, right? Is look in the mirror. And if you're not happy, then, maybe you should change something, right? On episode 37, we had a social impact advocate, Kara Holik. And Kara's really cool. She's someone that I had met in a coaching group, and has a really cool company doing social media with it's in the social impact space, which is, as you know, is near and dear to my heart. And she's very humble in her work, but she knows how impactful, social media can be. And her quote was, if we want to create a different world, we have to do things we've not done before. We can't create change by doing the same old stuff that we've always done. And it seems so simple, right? But it's so true, because so many of us, we just kind of, we go about doing the same things over and over again. And then we wonder, we're like, why are we getting the same, definition of insanity, right? Why are we getting the same output? And that's why, right? Is that we need to, we can't keep doing the same old stuff. Episode 39, we had our first couple on the show. We had those two other shows where there was two guests, but this was the first couple, and it was the Bullets, Julie and David Bullitt, and they have a really cool story, because she's a marriage and family therapist, and he's a divorce attorney. And they co-authored a cool book, the 5 Core Conversations for Couples, and they come together and they see things from different perspective, and that's why we called that episode Stronger Together. But the two quotes from them are from David first. We sat down and started banging it out under the umbrella of the basic areas that all of us who are in longer relationships should have discussions about. And that was in reference to their book, right? Is how did they come up with, this 5 Core Conversations? And, when part of their story is that they've adopted, they have some daughters, and they adopted some and some of their own. One quote from Julie was, there wasn't any more than a few seconds where I'm like, fight or flight, I want out of here. And, that's where she was talking that, there's just going to be hard times, right? There's gonna be hard times in a family, in a relationship, as a parent. Like, there are hard times, but just know that, that it's not always going to, be that way, and you can't get past that. In episode 41, Beyond the Mindset, we had author and speaker extraordinaire Alan Stein Jr. Just a really cool guy, has some incredible stories of his work with, professional athletes, megastars like Kobe Bryant or Kevin Durant, things like that. His book, Sustain Your Game, was the reason we want to have him on the podcast. He also has a book, Raise Your Game. But I urge you to go check out those books. I mean, they have fantastic stories in there that anyone can relate to, not just about basketball, but about life. And the quote that stood out from him was, everybody's going to have some swings and some misses. For me, I now have learned to talk to myself in a much more compassionate and kinder way when I make mistakes. And he was talking about how, before he would get down on himself, he'd beat himself up and everything. And that now he takes those swings and misses as learning opportunities of ways that he can grow and become better. And, I think that's super important for everybody. And the latest guest that we had in our highlight of the year was Terry Yoffe. And Terry is a super cool coach and consultant. And, that episode just released, and it's called Coaching Has Changed. And she just has this really cool perspective on, where things are going with life and coaching and everything. And, you go back and listen to that, because like I said, it was just last week. But, her quote was, "I hope and pray that everyone gets on the same page and can start to see what we can do if we all raise our voices in a positive and impactful way," because that's not happening today. Again, another one that's keeping it real, that sees that, stuff has to change. We can be better. And we owe it to one another to improve. So I hope you enjoyed those quotes. I hope you enjoyed looking back at the year. I didn't want to recap, my episodes, because you can always go back and look those up. I don't want this to be self-serving. I wanted to spotlight the fantastic guests that we had this year. They all had incredible episodes. There was blessings and inspiration and things that you can take from every one of them. And so please go back and listen to those episodes. You won't be disappointed, I promise you. So as we close today, I just want to say thank you once again to all our fantastic guests from 2022. We were honored and privileged to have you on the show. And we hope we honored you by sharing more of your wisdom with our audience today. And then I want to thank you all in the Impact Heroes in the iSpark Change community for supporting the iSpark Change podcast and supporting iSpark Change in general. Thank you for being a part of the community, and thank you for spreading positive change. And as always, thank you for taking the time to let me share my heart with you. We'll see you all next time. God bless you all.
Remember, Impact Heroes, every positive action can be a spark moment that has a ripple effect that spreads far beyond the initial act. So go out there and spark change. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, then please smash that 5-star rating on iTunes or Spotify and leave a review. We value your comments and we want to hear from you in the community. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and we'll see you next week on the iSpark Change podcast.